Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Cindy Shin, CEO of KACIE Strategies. I've been hosting a series of these media roundtables on a number of different topics, all, of course, virtually done so like this as we continue to practice social distancing. And today we're going to be talking about how the city of LA is addressing racial inequities and discrimination. Unfortunately, discrimination is still very prevalent here in society, and it's occurring in many different areas and in many different ways. And to address these issues, the LA Mayor, Eric Garcetti, has created this new Department of Civil and Human Rights. And it just opened its doors on July 1st, so they're now only in their second week. And today we'll be hearing from its first executive director, and that is Capri Maddox. I'm very excited to introduce her to you all. I've had the honors of working with Capri for many years, over a decade actually, when we both worked at the LA City Attorney's Office. I was in communications, and Capri back then was the neighborhood prosecutor for Wilshire area. And she's always been so energetic, an amazing attorney, and always very passionate about the communities, always wanted to listen to the community concerns and wanted to do something about that. And of course, to no surprise, she moved up to be a senior advisor for the city attorney, and also previously served as the president of LA Public Works. So Capri, thank you so much for being here. I know how busy you are. So I just want to go ahead and turn it over to you, Capri. Please tell us about this new department, its goals, and what you will be doing to address these discrimination issues as well as hate crime here in the city of LA.
Thank you, Cindy. Really appreciate it. It's truly an honor to be here and to be present. I just came from an event with Mayor Garcetti, as well as ABC's star Anthony Anderson, as we talked about the COVID equity crisis that we're dealing with. We were just in South Los Angeles at a testing site, encouraging people to be tested, as well as providing PPEs for our frontline workers. We know that we have the coronavirus that is really gripping key communities, particularly our Asian Pacific Islanders, our Latino, as well as African American communities. We know that this crisis does not discriminate, but it discriminates on how people suffer. And again, with so many people from the API community on the front lines, our Latino as well as our African American communities, racial disparities have raised their heads in so many ways. So I'm very grateful that the mayor, along with city council, saw it fit to create the Civil and Human Rights Department. And I would have never guessed that in 2020, we would need a Civil and Human Rights Department in the city of Los Angeles. But every time you turn on your TV or you read your newspapers, there are stories after stories about inequities, about racial disparities, and unfortunately about hate crimes. We had one, I believe was in the paper yesterday or Sunday, about crimes against our API community. Our Asian Pacific Islanders have been suffering tremendously as a result of hate speech that has come from, unfortunately, even public offices on the federal side that have been really offensive and vile and have created a culture of hate against our Asian Pacific Islander communities, or those that are perceived to be so. And we need to, as a department, as a city, and as just a nation in general, is to stand up against hate wherever we see it. If you think about it, Cindy, hate has been an issue for all communities. We saw this 2 years ago this summer, Charlottesville. We had people saying the Jews will not replace us, and they had flames, torches in their hands, walking down the street. And years ago, people who were doing that kind of behavior would have covered their faces with masks not related to the pandemic. They would have covered their faces because they wanted to protect and shield their identity. And now we have people in the age of social media walking down the streets feeling empowered and emboldened to have hate speech. And so it's not just one community over another. We're all in this together. We know that all groups have been attacked. And of course, I go on and on about what's happening in the African American community. We know there's anti-immigrant sentiment that has been problematic as well. We need to step up and address hate wherever and whenever we see it, because these issues will come home to deal with, to impact all of us. And it's something that I've been passionate about for a long time. And even when I was at the city attorney's office, one of my last assignments was to host a forum to stop hate crimes and hate incidents against our API community. We know that we had a number of folks come out to participate in that, in addition to Mr. Pure, our elected city attorney who sponsored the event. We had District Attorney Jackie Lacey, as well as Robin Toma from LA County Human Relations Commission, and we had Manju Karnik come on to help us as well. And we know that she's with AP 3Con, and she's this amazing leader in this space. And addressing hate wherever we see it is something that we all have a shared responsibility for. And what I've shared with a number of people as it relates to hate crimes against the Asian Pacific Islander community in particular is to be ready for some of those incidents that may happen. It's kind of like in preparation of what would you do. And I think that since we were seeing a lot of these things happen at our grocery stores, it's the only place, for a long time that we were all able to come together. We know that if something happens at a store now, we're paying attention. People are walking up to baby strollers and coughing on people's kids, and saying offensive things, or saying, we don't want this person at the store. And I think it's on all of us. Hate is a problem for all of us, but all of us have a role. And that is when someone else, such as myself or others, would say, there's no place for this. We're all in this together. Because people have asked me, like, if I'm at the grocery store and it happens, what do I do? And some people just freeze and they're silent. And we cannot be silent against this culture of hate. That's how it breeds, that's how it thrives, and that's how it becomes more hurtful. Because in addition to the assault, or it could be a violence or even a statement, and no one, the other people there didn't do anything, they didn't say anything, they didn't step up. So we at the Civil and Human Rights Department will be having hate crime prevention events. They'll maybe be virtually for a while once we get up and going, but we plan to do a number of in-person events with a number of our community partners, our community-based organizations, our faith-based institutions, philanthropic organizations, as well as our local universities and our neighborhood councils. So I really want to just give you a little bit of insight about what the department will do and how we can operate in this space. And then I'll talk a bit about the COVID crisis and a little bit more about that and some of the things that we're doing in the city of Los Angeles. So the Civil and Human Rights Department actually will have 3 commissions that will help us root out injustices in our region. So the three commissions are the Commission on the Status of Women, the Human Relations Commission, as well as the Civil and Human Rights Commission. And in addition to those 3 commissions, we also have a Transgender Advisory Council, and they're also stepping up and doing a great deal of work. You should know that in my last couple of days with the City Attorney's Office, I received information about 2 hate crimes. Both of them were against transgender women. One of them was at a park near the downtown area where someone pulled a knife on a group of transgender women, saying that he wanted to kill them. The next incident was related to someone that was in her car driving, and someone said hateful words against her and actually smashed his car into her car. And he had been following her for quite some time. Unfortunately, this person lived in their car. So again, this culture of hate is touching all communities. The next thing that the Civil and Human Rights Department will do is to address the discriminatory practices. And it could be in commerce, education, employment, or housing. And just to drill down on a couple of things as relates to commerce, for example, lending practices. When we look at African Americans and our Latinx population, they oftentimes pay more for their mortgages than Caucasians with the same credit score. We know that in education, there are so many disparities in resources and as it relates to even punishments and expulsions from schools. The other thing that's really important to think about too is the African American population is 8% of LAUSD's population. However, they represent 34% of the special ed population. And as a student in Los Angeles at Los Angeles Unified School, I was actually directed towards special ed, and it was like, you're special ed until proven otherwise, you know? And so that is not a practice that is happening now in LAUSD, but we need to think about how we are dealing with all of our students and our students of color in particular, and even helping those students that have exhibited talent and skills above their peers. The next thing that you should know is when we talk about employment, we know that we have disparities as it relates to hiring, discipline, and firing procedures. And then the last area that I think we should talk about is housing. Again, racial disparities over the years have really hurt so many communities, particularly communities of color. But when we talk about vending practices, again, we're really struggling in that space. So as we move forward, our department will actually have authority through the Civil and Human Rights Commission to enforce violations of the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance that was passed by a council. Champions of that space are Council Member Gil Cedillo, Council Member Wesson, that really stepped up and led and pushed this effort for us, along with Mayor Garcetti. The thing that I think is really important to note too is we're not just going to stop with, you know, preventing hate crimes or making sure that we have equity in, you know, commerce, employment, education, housing. We want to be sure that we have a platform to empower people, to allow them to go into the middle class and beyond. And we're going to have a number of empowerment events through the Office of Racial Equity, which will also be a part of our operation. We are interested in having upward mobility events, and we already have a couple of sponsors that are coming online to help us facilitate some of those events. We have an opportunity to share a number of practices and tactics as it relates to we have a number of practices and tactics that will allow us to move the needle as it relates to empowerment opportunities. We're going to have upward mobility events. We know, unfortunately, government has been a part of discriminatory practices, internment camps, as it relates to racial covenants on property, et cetera. So we believe that government should be a part of the solution. And as the mayor says, he wants to be an anti-racist, and he wants to level the playing field. And we'll be doing a number of events. We'll need the community support in this space. For example, we might have boot camp events for a number of subjects. And I'll give you a quick example. We want to do it in education, higher education, to help prepare people for graduate school and beyond. We also are interested in maintaining home ownership, getting people into home ownership and allowing them to retain their properties. And then finally, we're interested in helping to move the needle with business owners and business ownership, and to support our business owners. We learned so many lessons even in the pandemic that we're facing. Some of our businesses were not set up with and didn't have the proper procedures or protocols, or an understanding of how to have a relationship with their banking partner to even apply for the PPP loans and grants. And so when you think about and that was the Paycheck Protection Program, the definition of PPP. And I think it's important for us to support our partners wherever they are, and to stand up to level the playing field. We're not looking only for equality. We are looking for equity, Cindy, because that is, if we just make things equal, we'll still, have the gap. That will just continue. So we want to be sure that we have equity in our spaces and in Los Angeles, because a rising tide lifts all boats. And that is why I am very excited and grateful for the mayor's leadership, along with city council, to step up and stand up this department for such a time as this.
Thank you for that. It sounds like you have a lot of work to do, but I hear the passion in your voice, and I'm really excited that you are the one that's going to be leading this department. Thank you. And so, like I said, you're a very busy person. You're also serving as the Chief Officer of COVID-19 Response
Yes.
Equity Team. Can you tell us about your work there, and how you're addressing those issues of certain ethnic groups disproportionately being affected by this pandemic?
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up, Cindy. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to serve as the nation's first COVID equity chief. I am so grateful for the opportunity to serve, and it was so important for us to stand this up. You should know that Mayor Garcetti has really rolled up his sleeves as it relates to addressing the COVID crisis. Of course, we were one of the first major cities in the nation to stand up testing for asymptomatic participants, and we wanted to know exactly how things were spreading. And the mayor really took a lot of heat, I'll just say, in closing things down early on. But we can see that now it's pretty apparent that by having testing all over, and by closing down some operations in our city, we were able to slow the curve. And I think the mayor actually saved a lot of lives by taking action when it was not popular. Another thing I think it's really important to see and to know is we just at Kedron Health Center doing a testing just now in South Los Angeles. The mayor is also putting resources where there is a need. He didn't divide up the city and say, equally, we're going to give resources, all over. He put the resources where there was need. That's why you are seeing testing at Dodger Stadium, in Echo Park. You're seeing it in Koreatown. You're seeing testing opportunities in South Los Angeles at Crenshaw Christian Center, as well as the Kedron location I just left, with our dear friend Anthony Anderson from ABC show Blackish, that was donating supplies and materials to our essential workers. The other thing we need to keep in mind is a lot of people of color, our Asian Pacific Islanders, our African Americans, as well as our Latino brothers and sisters, are frontline workers. We're essential workers. And a lot of times we can't take off work or work from home. And we're also in closer quarters as it relates to our living situations. So the spread opportunities are there. And then, of course, in some communities, we have pre-existing conditions such as heart disease, obesity, asthma, for example, and diabetes. And so when you have some of those pre-existing conditions that are also a product of racial disparities. And I want to be clear that, like for example, our Latinx population has the highest percentage of toxins in their system from environmental factors. And when you think about so many challenges and issues that they call them comorbidity factors that people have, a lot of times it may be an indirect or direct result of racial disparities. When you think about housing disparities, we're looking at people that may have the credit and the resources to live in one area, but in years gone by, they were forced because of redlining or racial covenants to have to move to a different area. And that area may have had a factory that caused increased numbers of asthma. I'm a person that actually suffers with asthma, and it's a possibility it was caused by the environment. Of course, I'm a native of Southern California. I've lived in different places, but I was here in the 70s when we had smog days. And when you think about those problems that were happening years ago, it's affecting us now. And we're looking at the diabetes issue, for example. So many people of color live in food deserts. And so when we look at our community and we know that people of color are our frontline workers and they're essential workers, it is essential to support them and to lift them up in this crisis. And that is what we're trying to do at the City of Los Angeles. And I think we're actually really moving the needle as it relates to testing opportunities and providing resources and making sure that people have as much information to make informed decisions about how to care for themselves. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the mayor, I think it was like the 3 or 4 C's. He says, cover your face, avoid crowds, and avoid close proximity to others. Here, we know that this is a real disease. Some of us know people that have died from this this awful infection, and we need to be sure that we step things up to make a difference for our residents here. And as a representative of the city family, we are all in to address some of these inequities. I also can give you a couple of stats about how many resources we have put on this effort. And the mayor has put well over $70 million on testing. We have also tested over 900,000 Angelenos. And again, we offer testing to asymptomatic people. We know that the mayor follows the science. We know that asymptomatic people can spread the virus. So we allow people that don't exhibit symptoms to be able to have an opportunity for testing. We also know that there are a number of testing centers that are all over our region. And the mayor, really, we're not in the testing business in the city of Los Angeles, but we are in the people business. And we saw there was a need for our people, and we wanted to step up in that space and to fill that void. And us ramping up testing, I believe, actually allowed our community-based organizations, our nonprofits, as well as local pharmacies to ramp up testing in those early days, which again helped us flatten the curve.
Thank you so much, Capri. So let's just go ahead and open it up. If any of you guys have any questions or comments, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, Capri. My name is John. I am from the World Journal. Our newspaper is we located in Los Angeles, and we are majorly serving the Asian Chinese American communities. So my question is, I have 2 questions. So the first question is, I don't know, have you heard about this, that there is a open letter from students from the San Marino school district talking about like there are some open racial discrimination and cyberbullying from like student group, like they call them Husk, and really attacking the other students who are East Asian and the students who from Middle East. And those victims' plea was ignored by the school district and the local police department. So they choose to do it as an open letter and call for help. And this kind of make me worry about two things. So first of all, of course, there is certain bureaucratic cover-up on this situation. And secondly, it's when you're looking at this kind of participant, though, it's a kind of racial discrimination. Like those people are not like adults, like they are young, like 13, 14, 16 years old teenagers who received certain informations or participated in the behavior. And I think this may be much more severe because we are having kids who are indoctrinated by this kind of racist values. So like in this situation, I wonder what's your department's policy about this kind of phenomenon? Thank you.
Okay, so I want to be sure that I answer your question. I know this incident happened in San Marino School District, which is outside of the city of Los Angeles limits. But I wanted to be sure that I clarified that we actually don't have authority over any public institutions. However, we have a number of, as far as bringing cases, however, we have the bully pulpit. Unfortunately, these kids were bullied, but we have a bully pulpit that we use for in a positive way, where we can actually have hate crime prevention events. And through the Office of Racial Equity, we can do studies and show where the numbers are and show what the typical responses are in all areas of, Southern California, for example. Again, we know that hate breeds where there is silence. This is not the time to be silent. I think there are a lot of people that tried to be polite in 2016 before hate crimes really, hate incidents and hate crimes really accelerated in our nation. And I think now is the time for people to speak out. And we know that sunlight is the best disinfectant. So what I would highly recommend in that instance is to maybe reach out to some of our other partners. And if you can give me more information about it, I actually will make sure that we have someone look into it. Like I said, even though it's outside of our area, you can see my email address at the bottom of my screen here. And then of course, Mission has my contact information as well. So I appreciate you bringing that up. It is a problem. And this is another reason why we need to step up and stop hate incidents from happening, because our kids are seeing, as I mentioned earlier, I have a 13-year-old son, he's in middle school, loves computers, straight A student, and he is seeing so many forms of hate on social media, as well as hearing things in his school that I never heard. And I'm not saying it was perfect, but I did not, deal with racially charged comments on a regular basis as a student. And I would think that it would be just the opposite, that I would hear more hate speech than my young son. So I appreciate you bringing this up. And again, this is why we have to start to address these problems and address them early and often, because these kids will grow up and do hateful things later on and have a variety of professions. And we don't want to continue the cycle of hate. We want it, this has to end in my generation. We cannot allow this to go forward. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your service. Is there anything else that I need to add to that question?
Ethan, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. And I'm so sorry that happened.
And I'll make sure I connect Ethan and Capri together, just if he wants to provide more information on that.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I have a question. Thank you for taking the time. My name is Christina Oriel. I'm with the Asian Journal, and we primarily cover Filipino American issues, but since March, I think we've been covering bigger Asian American crimes. And as most of us are aware, there was this incident in Torrance recently where there was the woman who was caught on video twice, berating 2 Asian Americans, one of whom was a Filipino American. And she was also found to have physically assaulted another Filipina last year, and she was arrested but released on bail. The Torrance city's attorney's office isn't going to charge her for any of the viral video incidences. And seeing stuff like that, it sends kind of a chilling effect to our community when they don't see crimes like this being prosecuted. So what is the city of LA doing to address things like that, especially at this time when communities of color are kind of afraid to speak up and call the police?
Great question. And, as a former prosecutor, there may be a multitude of reasons why they do not bring the case. And of course, sometimes it's identity, that's not an issue with this case. But we need to know that regardless of whether the case is being brought, I do think that we need to be sure that we continue the pressure and have the voice to let people know what is going on. Like I said, it's unfortunate the case was not filed, and I don't want to second guess the prosecutorial reasons for that. Sometimes, we may not have a cooperating witness. There could be a number of things that could happen, or maybe all the elements of the crime weren't present. But I think in seeing that video, just definitely put a chill up my spine. And I think the other thing that we have going for us now is we've had viral videos, and a lot of these viral videos have allowed us to send a message that hate will not be tolerated, and there can be other repercussions for hateful activities. We've noticed that some people have actually even lost their jobs or have been shunned by their communities for being hateful, especially in the middle of a pandemic, to be so hateful in such a way. And I believe it's an incident with the child. It's something that is reprehensible to all, regardless of your race or your background. And I think the other thing that's really important, really why I put together the event for City Attorney Mike Fuhr and make sure that we invited our district attorney, was to really take a stand and to raise the antenna and to send a message to our prosecutors in the city of Los Angeles and in the county of Los Angeles that this is an issue and it should not be tolerated. Of course, like I said, in this case, it did not bring, there were no charges brought. However, I think that it's important for us to just keep up the message. And like I said, our newspaper articles, like I said, just this weekend or Monday, was able to, highlight once again, this is an issue, this is real, it needs to be addressed, and our government leaders need to step up. One thing that I'll be able to do with the office when we talk about the new department, Civil and Human Rights Department, is if this incident had taken place and it was tied to a business, and it was someone that worked there or had some kind of connection, and it was in Los Angeles, I could write a letter of concern and even offer mediation if my referral to the law enforcement entity was not followed up on. I would still have other tools in my toolbox. And let me just tell you, companies and organizations would not want to have a letter of concern in a public document saying that their employee was involved in hate. Again, in this instance, I don't think it was an employee, but I want to be sure that that is a remedy that we do have if it's connected to an organization.
Capri, can you elaborate a little bit on that, the complaint process? If someone feels that they've been discriminated, do they call your office, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So being that we're up for 2 weeks, we have not completed our intake forms, but soon and very soon we will have an intake and complaint process. Someone would basically tell us what happened, where it happened, and the basic parameters. And then of course, if it falls into anything that is preempted by state law or federal law, meaning, you know, the EEOC or the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, the state can handle, they actually, you know, would supersede us in authority. But as it relates to commerce and education, we pretty much have a wide array of places and spaces where we can bring cases. And so what would happen is we would review the case. We would have human relations advocates that can serve as investigators to talk to our witnesses, go to the location, see if, you know, anyone else heard it, look at the videos, etc. And then they would do a report, and then that report would come to me, and we could do a number of things, all the way from a letter of concern to mediation to even a notice of violation. And if we find, and you know, we have a hearing and we find that that the violation has taken place, we can have a fine against that individual up to $250,000 per incident. And when you think about those, and you should know that the resources can be compensatory to compensate the victim, as well as administrative fees for local government, so that the fees would actually go to the city of Los Angeles. And when we look at those violations, we know that they send a strong signal, and double jeopardy does not apply. So if you are found to be in violation and you're fined by us to have a notice of violation and you're punished in that space, well, guess what? We can still submit a case to the city. You can still submit a case to the city attorney's office or district attorney's office for other means of punishment. So, and I'll give you examples of some things that have happened. And even in some of, as it relates to API hate crimes and hate incidents, I should say, we have more hate incidents than hate crimes. However, when we look at a business, they may refuse service to someone based on their race or perceived race, and they make sure that that's what they're doing. We would then send a letter to the organization or the business, and to say, we understand on this day this incident happened and we are concerned, please contact us. We would like to refer you to mediation. Again, it could be something as mild as that, or something as harsh as, we'll bring a case, we'll have a notice of violation against you, and you'll be hit with fines, and we can also do a referral to our other partners. So thank you for the question, Cindy, and it's really important for you to know that I'm so excited that we actually have teeth to deal with some of these injustices, and not just, let's talk about them, let's do another study, or let's, you know, have an event, you know, encouraging people to not do anything that's inappropriate.
This is a two-part question. First of all, hi.
Hi, how are you, dear?
Again, I have a question for Cindy, and I also have a question for you. So Cindy, I kind of want to know more about KACIE Strategies, and what was your purpose in kind of bringing us in this roundtable together, and the mission of KACIE Strategies. And then for Ms. Capri, a lot of the hate crimes happen in real time, where people are just with their iPhones and recording it live. And you know, when it happens within our city, how does one respond to that from like a city government standpoint? Like, how is that response going to happen, where this is just a recording of someone getting, you know, racially profiled or brutally abused from any nationality? So is there like a tweet that we can send out, or how is that real-time response going to happen? Because I know that's going to be a lot of red tape with getting through the cases. So when it has nothing to do with like big corporate businesses or anything like that, how do we get to those real problems that are happening on the streets?
So thank you so much, Betty. So great to hear your voice again. A very important question. We know things do happen in real time. And I think that of having, a cell phone in everyone's pocket is important for helping us to identify the perpetrator. And tweeting things out and putting them on social media is very important, of course, to help us with identifying the person perhaps, but we need to still have a police report filled out. And you can go to your local police station. We have, over 20 police stations in the city of Los Angeles. So you're able to actually have a police report. But I will tell you this, as a prosecutor, I have heard about an incident happening on social media. And then I've gone to my office to say, hey, I heard about this on social media. Is that case in our office? So I think the meshing of going to the police station as well as clearly documenting the case is very important. And people documenting on their phones if they can do so safely. So I think that you can't just hit the tweet and instantly a police report is filed. But we do need to have you go down to the process, because when we are serving as prosecutors, we'll need a victim and witness to help us with the case, should we go to trial. So thank you for that question, and I'll yield the floor to Cindy. Thank you again.
Thank you, Capri, and thank you, Betty, so much for that question and for wanting to learn more about my company. So KACIE Strategies is it's a public relations company, but one of the initiatives that I have is to promote more partnerships between government, community-based organizations, just to be able to better reach those different communities that normally are very difficult to reach. One of the things I do is these media roundtables, and I do a lot of it with ethnic media, of course, as well, because when you want to reach out to the people in these various communities, reaching out through ethnic media does and is very effective, and that's one of the reasons why I've been doing this, especially during these tough times with COVID-19. I've been doing these virtually, but it's working, and we're able to just put out all of the needed information out there to these different communities. And yeah, so I've been doing a number of these roundtables on a number of different topics related to COVID-19. I've done one on domestic violence, mental health issues, child abuse, and even special education. So we have a lot more coming, and I appreciate all of you being here, and I wish that we could do more of these and have Capri on here one more time as well. But thank you so much for that question.
I would gladly come back.
Thank you. Any more questions? Let's see.
And one thing I just would like to say as we close, we appreciate the fact that the media is a partner in reporting and talking about hate crimes and hate incidents. And if we, again, silence is the friend of hate. And so the more sunlight we can get on this issue, it is the best disinfectant. And I really appreciate Cindy, my former esteemed colleague and someone who was a journalist and on-air personality in her own right, even before public service. I am just delighted that she is continuing to serve the public in her private capacity. And, she's got the fire and the flavor of public service in her, and she is continuing to make a difference. So again, to commend you, Cindy, and to all our partners in media that, really put a light on some of these things that are happening, because your reports do make a difference. People are talking about this. They're teaching their children about it. They're being more aware when they're in public. They're being more supportive of victims of hate incidents, and actually, making sure that we have a more harmonious Los Angeles. So thank you for your service, and thank you also for making a difference.